Hey y'all, Scott here, and damn it! I own Sonic Jam! It's a pretty rare game, but I don't want to be known as the guy who owns Sonic Jam when I'm dead.
If you tell somebody you collect video games, you are most definitely going to get the question, what's the rarest game you own?
Come back to me on that one.
I firmly believe if you want to collect stuff and have fun while doing it, it's best to do it with things you legitimately enjoy and not just collect it because, ooh, it's worth something. I collect the games I want to collect and play eventually. The rarity or value hardly matters to me. However, it is still fairly interesting to know. I mean, I bought Gravity Rush Remastered because I wanted it, but hey, now that it's $70, I guess this is my personality now. But that's beside the point. There aren't infinite copies of all video games available. I know it feels like there's a Connected Ventures every few inches, but I guarantee you there's a finite amount. Some video games are as common as leaves, but then there are the video games that just never sold that well or just never had a ton of copies produced. Now, a game can be rare right from the get-go, but mostly the value increases over time as more and more people realize, oh god, that's a rare game, I want that. But let's lay this out right here. Rare games aren't always valuable, and valuable games aren't always rare. A game's value comes down to how many people want it and how many people are willing to pay a hefty price for it. I can make a house out of all the Mario Party 2s out in the world, but a lot of people really want that game right now, so it costs nearly as much as a new game. But it ain't rare, that's for sure. But then you have whatever the hell this is. A pre-owned copy of Madden 93 for the Sega Genesis, complete with a specific cardboard box for pre-owned games. I guarantee you this is far more rare than Mario Party 2, but you won't see anybody breaking down my door for this.
Maybe.
Technically, any copy of any game can be slightly altered to become the rarest version of that game. See? Here? Look. One of a kind. The only thing that'll make this valuable is if somebody is willing to pay $300 for it.
Everybody's obsessed with the rarest games of all time, owning the rarest games of all time, playing the rarest games of all time. As long as they're worth something. Now I'm only interested in picking up rare games that I want to play really bad, but I'm willing to make an exception for the sake of investing. I want to find the rarest game of all time to help me pay off some fun debt.
Well, what do I constitute as a rare game? Well, something that's uncommon, of course. I think the only rare games that get attention are the ones that sell for ridiculous amounts of money. You couldn't pay me to pay this much. It doesn't help that a lot of articles go up detailing old vintage things you might have in your attic that might be worth a fortune. Yeah, an original Game Boy is rare. It's like $700. Yeah, okay, no. I mean, all you have to do to feel better about owning something is to search for it on eBay and sort the listing from highest price first. I'll think about it. I remember when a bunch of people thought they totally scored after a bunch of articles appeared online saying the VHS tapes of old Disney movies were selling for That's not the case. That's how much some sellers are asking for these things. Are people buying for that much?
I hope not.
The value of rare items is only as much as people are willing to spend on them. In my opinion, no game is worth more than the original asking price of it, and even then, Sushi Striker retail for $50, my god. A pretty surefire way to know the true value of a game isn't to go on eBay and say, welp. It's to go on price starting websites. These track how much games sold for over time, so you know the average going price of these things. But if I'm gonna pay top dollar for a game, it may as well be the rarest of all time. But hey, who knows? Let's look through my collection and see if I already own rare games. Well, this is it. These are the elusive games in my collection. I own a lot of heavily desired games that go for a lot of money, but these ain't rare. Like, I own a copy of Shenmue, please like me. I own a copy of Sonic Jam on the Sega Saturn.
That's fucking right.
This is probably the rarest game I have. I mean, I have Gravity Rush Remastered, a few uncommon Wii U titles, Chibi Robo, Retro Game Challenge, Xenoblade Chronicles, nothing that crazy. I have Metal Slug Anthology for the PlayStation 2. This was a fairly uncommon game for that system for a while there. I found it for $60 and I scooped it up. The value now is, oh, son of a bitch. I find the value of games to fluctuate like crazy over time. It generally has to do with what's the big nostalgia craze and what's not easily accessible. For that reason, GameCube is fairly expensive now, while a lot of the value of older consoles around the NES era aren't necessarily shooting up in value. The big nostalgia boom for that thing was around 2010, but now it's Chibi Robo's time to shine. Look at that! But we're not just looking for expensive games, we're looking for something that's one of a kind, the rarest of all games. Well, we're not really gonna find much in terms of the more modern consoles. The older the system gets, the harder it is to find stuff for it, and thus, the rarer and more expensive some games get. Now, we do have a ton of companies that specialize in limited releases for games recently, but they usually produce a few thousand copies of games. That's just not rare enough. Who knows, I mean, these things might skyrocket in value in 10 years, but for now, get out of my face, Night Trap. 5,000 copies, big fucking whoop. I feel like one of the most likely candidates for an intentionally rare game that's going to skyrocket in value is Axiom Verge on Wii U. Only 5,000 copies on a system nobody's heard of. It's like I'm owning a ticking time bomb of profit. There is that game for the PlayStation 4 that I refuse to say because I'll fucking die laughing. This had a similar limited release strategy with only around 1,000 copies produced. However, the company that sold it was run by one guy who ripped off the Limited Run Games logo, sold the game on April Fool's Day on a website that looks like something you should give your credit card to. Many just thought the release was a joke, but it happened. Only around 80 people bought copies, and the 900 or so copies that were left unsold, well, who knows what happened to them. So this takes the reins for the current rarest game of all time. Let me point this away from the door in case anybody walks in. If we go back a generation, games start to get a little more pricey. The PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 don't really have many expensive games outside of collector's editions, but the PlayStation 3 has NBA Elite 11. It was canceled, but some copies were accidentally sold at retailers. Now, how many copies actually exist of this game? If I had to guess, I'd say something in the low triple digits, but who knows? But there we go, we have another candidate for the rarest game of all time. Boom. Nothing on the Wii, DS, or PSP even comes close to this game's rarity, which is why we should go back another generation. Gotcha Force is probably the rarest standard GameCube game, and I guarantee that's the sole reason most people own it. There's also NCAA College Basketball 2K3, nowhere near as rare or expensive as Gotcha Force or Elite 11, but hey, 2 rare basketball games, you have to admire that. There's Ninja 5-0 for the Game Boy Advance, which is even more expensive than Gotcha Force. The money per square inch is through the roof on this thing. Rule of Rose on the PlayStation 2 and Steel Battalion on Xbox are up there too, but these games all fail the eBay test. If I can go on eBay and find a handful of copies, they aren't rare enough. Now we're starting to get more into the golden age of video game rarities. Information wasn't kept up nearly as well in the past as it is now with video games, so there are a ton more oddities as we go back. Clay Fighter Sculptor's Cut on Nintendo 64 is the crowning jewel of that platform, and it's not even good.
I'll pay $400!
It was a Blockbuster exclusive update to Clay Fighter 63 and a third, and there were around 20,000 copies produced.
Well, I don't give a shit anymore. This is ridiculous. All these rare games have 5,000 plus copies made of them. And the only rarer than rare games we've seen so far are The Death of Society and a basketball game. And I've already played a basketball game within the year. I don't want to do it again.
The PlayStation 1 has fairly reasonable prices all around, but none compare to LSD Dream Emulator. Well, no wonder this one's up there. The rarest Game Boy game, definitely Amazing Tater, going for a whopping Game Boy Color had a ton of late system support, even when the Game Boy Advance was alive and well, but easily the rarest of the Game Boy Color games was Shantae, going for a few $100.
It's not rare enough!
That's why we need to go even further back in history, to the NES. This is the golden age of rare games, the era where information wasn't as easily accessible as it is now. Who knew Kid Clown was gonna be 200 eventually? Tell me, who? While on the NES, there are the usual suspects. Bubble Bobble Part 2, Panic Restaurant, Flintstones Surprise at Dinosaur Peak, and the big one, Little Samson. All of these games are quite good later NES titles. Now, good enough to spend over $300 on, that's tricky to answer. These are kind of the big rare games in the NES library most collectors go for. I mean, don't get me wrong, they're rare, but they're not impossible to get. That's the trick with rare and valuable games. I feel like they're more likely to be in demand when they hit that sweet spot. Incredibly hard to find, but very possible to obtain. You can find all of these on eBay quite frequently, so none of these could really be the rarest games of all time. They're just heavily desired and heavily uncommon. That's why they're so expensive. But let's go a step further with rare NES stuff. How about Bubble Bath Babes? Yes, an unlicensed racy NES puzzle game with babes in a bubble bath. How does gameplay of this get past the YouTube censors? Now, this is definitely more uncommon than any of these, but there's a good few copies lurking around there of Bubble Bath Babes, so surely there's something more elusive and rare than Bubble Bath Babes. Well, I mean, one of the most well-known rare games is the Nintendo World Championship cartridge. The gray version was used in the competition and given to the finalists, while the gold ones are much more limited and were given away via a contest in Nintendo Power. But the thing is, combined, there's still a bit over 100 of these things lurking out there. We're looking for double digits or less over here. Plus, these were never official retail releases, so should they really count? Stadium Events was officially released via retail, but was taken off the store shelves very quickly after Nintendo bought the rights to it and released it as their own game, World Class Track Meet. About 200 copies of Stadium Events are believed to exist, with only up to 20 potentially still being completed in the box. Now, a lot of rare games are only rare in specific regions of the world. Stadium Events is the most rare here in North America. It's still pretty rare in PAL territories, and in Japan, it's $20. Are you f***ing serious? Stadium Events may be one of the rarest games ever released via retail for the NES, but it's all about the label. It's the same game as World Class Track Meet, so is it really worth getting laid over owning it?
Yes.
However, if we go back to those darn dang competition cartridges, Nintendo hosted the Nintendo Campus Challenge in 1991, and only one official cartridge exists. Well, we found one of the rarest games ever created. However, this was never supposed to be available to the public, so can it really be considered the rarest game ever made if nobody really had a chance to buy it from retail? Well, let's go all the way back to the Atari 2600 to find some rarer gems. Pepsi Invaders is one I always think about, a Space Invaders clone, but you obliterate 5 letters instead. It was made by Coke, and if anything, this game makes me want Pepsi. However, with only 125 cartridges within existence, it's easily one of the rarest 2600 games, but not the rarest. There's only like 13 known copies of Air Raid that exist. But then there's Red Sea Crossing, which was only available via mail order. 100 were apparently produced, but only 2 have been found. But then let's move over to the Sega Genesis. Tetris, I have $20,000, I know what I'm doing tonight. This version of Tetris was never officially released due to Nintendo having the rights to Tetris on consoles at the time, and only 10 copies are known to exist. But again, it wasn't officially released. How about the Super Nintendo competition cartridges? Now, Nintendo hosted 2 Super Nintendo competitions, Campus Challenge 92 and Powerfest 94. Similar situations to the NES competition cartridges. Very rare, not officially available to the public, so why not the Donkey Kong Country and Star Fox competition cartridges? They were edited versions of both games to be played in a competitive environment. They were only available via Blockbuster, and only 2,500 copies were made available. Are you f***ing kidding me? This is Child's Play. Come on, why talk about these when Air Raid exists?
Alright, I think I figured it out. See, these are potentially the rarest games of all time. One of these may just be the rarest game of all time. And after all the research, after all the eBay searches, I've come down to which one would give me the most unique game collection of them all. Which one is, in fact, the rarest game of all time. It's Sonic 2 with a line!